Hello everyone, welcome to the course of Survey of Major English-Speaking Countries. Today, we're going to learn Chapter 10, History of the United States. This lecture is about Lesson A, the early history of this country. The American continent were peopled as a result of two long continuing immigration movements. The first was from Asia, and the second from Europe and Africa. The first movement began probably 25,000 years ago when Siberian tribes, in search of new hunting grounds or of refuge from pursuing enemies, crossed over the Bering Strait to Alaska. The ancestors of living Native Americans arrived in what is now the United States thousands of years ago, possibly much earlier, from Asia via Beringia. A vast variety of peoples, societies, and cultures subsequently developed. The Native Americans settled in different regions in the country and formed independent tribes with distinctive Indian cultures. By 1492, there were over 300 separate Native American languages. When Christopher Columbus landed on October 12, 1492, he thought he had reached India and called the native people Indians, a name which Native Americans have come to appreciate, as the term gave them a collective identity. By 1492, over 10 to 20 million people inhabited America. They developed their own Aboriginal cultures, which ranged from the simple to the complex, from those of the primitive tribes to the brilliant civilizations of the Aztec, the Inca, and the Mayas. But their technological development had lagged behind that of the Europe and Asia. The second migration to America began with the expansion of Europe as the start of the modern period from the 16th century. In 1492, Columbus persuaded the King and the Queen of Spain to finance his voyage. He believed that by sailing west from Europe, he could reach the Far East. He never succeeded, but instead, he landed on one of the Bahamas Islands in the Caribbean Sea and discovered the New World. Based on Columbus' discovery, the Spanish king could claim the territory in America, and later Spain conquered the new land and established a huge empire and grabbed enormous wealth from the Indians. In 1497, another Italian sailor, John Cabot, who was in the service of the English king, arrived in today's Canada, and the English king claimed that the whole of the territory of North America belongs to England. Enforcing this claim, the Englishmen began to establish permanent settlements in North America by the beginning of the 17th century. The English permanent settlement in North America when Western Europe was undergoing great changes. By the 16th century, some new and powerful social forces began to emerge, which led to the awakening of Europe and the discovery of America. The major new force was the development of capitalism. The growth of capitalism produced two new classes, the bourgeois class and the working class. With the fast development of commerce and trade, the bourgeois became increasingly powerful in politics as well as in economy. They wanted to share power with federal laws, and in some countries, such as England, they wanted to have more power from the king so that they could have free development. The English Revolution was the result of this growth of capitalism. Against the backgrounds of the emerging new forces of commerce and trade, the 13 English colonies that would become the United States of America were planted in North America. The first English permanent settlement was founded in 1607 in Virginia. This was organized by the London Company with a charter from the English King James I. The company sent 3 small ships and 144 English men to Virginia. They named the landed places after their king and began to build a town called Jamestown. Most of the earliest colonists were adventurous English gentlemen, including some business people who refused to do any manual labor, and very few of them were willing laborers. Yet the London Company had wished to have a quick return for its investment and had instructed them to hunt for gold and other wealth as soon as they landed. When the colonists settled down, they didn't grow food. Instead, a few laborers started to dig for gold, while those English gentlemen were doing nothing. Unfortunately, nothing was found. Soon they ran into the shortage of food. When the second group of men arrived with supplies, almost all the early colonists were killed by starvation, cold, or diseases. Jamestown was in a great crisis. Captain John Smith, the leadership, he imposed discipline by making everyone work. A few years later, another colonist, John Rolfe, began to experiment with the West Indian tobacco, and these plants grew well in Virginia soil. John Rolfe, this 24-year-old English farmer, ambitious, self-reliant, and visionary. What takes us less than 6 hours today by plane was then a voyage more than 2 months. 7 of the early adventurers out of every 10 would be dead within a year. North America was the ultimate land of opportunities. But what John Rolfe found as the English settlement of Jamestown was hell on earth. More than 500 settlers made the journey before John Rolfe. Barely 60 remained. It's called the starving time. After having horses and other animals, they had boots, shoes, and any other leather they came across. Just 3 months, John Rolfe arrived. A man is burned at the stake for killing his pregnant wife and planning to eat her. The English arrived unprepared for the New World and unwilling to perform manual labor. Instead of livestock, they brought chemical tests for gold that they never found. John Rolfe didn't come to plunder and live like the others. He arrived with a supply of South American tobacco seeds. And in a warm, humid climate and a fertile soil around Jamestown, Rolfe's tobacco crops flourished. The first large harvest produced by the seeds is worth more than $1 million in today's money. Rolfe married the daughter of the king of the Powhatan Empire, and her name became legend. Pocahontas. In England, Rolfe made her a celebrity when her face is put on the portraits that are sold all over London. William Shakespeare mentioned the colony, and the English riches invested money there. All of London knew about the land of plenty. Within 2 years, Tobacco grew in every garden. From the living hell, Jamestown was America's first boomtown. 2 years later, nearly 1,000 more settlers arrived, including 19 African slaves. 30 years later, there were over 20,000 settlers in Virginia. America was founded on tobacco. For the next century and a half, it's the continent's largest export. 10 years after John Rolfe arrived in Jamestown, another group of English settlers landed in New England. New England today includes Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and Rhode Island in the northeast of the United States. It was founded by the English Puritans, who separated themselves from the Church of England. On September 16, 1621, 102 passengers, also known as the Pilgrims now, left England on the ship of Mayflower with the hope of seeking religious freedom in the New World. After 3 months of dangerous voyage crossing Atlantic Ocean, they landed ashore of a deserted beach and called the place Plymouth, after the English port they sailed from. Unfortunately, they arrived in North America in the beginning of the winter, when it was in the middle of the mini ice age. Temperatures were lower, winters were longer, and what's worse, the soil was poor, little grew, and food supplies went dangerously low. During the first 3 months, more than half of the people died of diseases, cold, and starvation. When things just became desperate, luckily, they received a helping hand from American Indians. The Pokinokis people lived nearby, taught the European settlers how to use fish as fertilizer to grow corn and pumpkin in sandy soil, and how to hunt in the woods of wilderness. With the help of the local Indians, the fields produced a yield rich beyond expectations. The English settlers celebrated their first harvest in 1621 as the first Thanksgiving, day of prayer thanking God for blessings. It was attended by 90 Native Americans and 53 pilgrims. The new English settlers became accustomed to regular celebrating Thanksgiving in Plymouth Plantation. They formed their own religious community and set up a civic government for the general good of the colony. Puritanism in New England changed gradually due to the frontier environment and the mobility of the population. It is the start of a period of prosperity that will transform North America. From Jamestown to Plymouth, as more and more people crossed the Atlantic, tens of thousands of people with different backgrounds, different reasons came to this place for better lives. America became the place for everyone from everywhere. Following the two patterns of early American culture in Virginia and New England was the pattern in the colony of Maryland, founded by the Catholics. The founder was the second Lord Baltimore. He wished to introduce a feudal system similar to the manor system in Europe to his colony. But not long after the founding of his colony, the feudal experimental plan was dropped, and the colony, like other colonies in North America, followed a capitalist development road. The fourth colonial pattern in North America was set by William Penn, an English Quaker who had been looking for a place for his fellow believers to live according to his religious faith. The Quakers argued that religion was a person's private business with God. Therefore, no government should interfere in his or her religious beliefs. William Penn carried out the policy of separation of state and the church in his colony. Penn's holy experiment had a great impact on American culture. Many people held this colony up as proof that man could lead a good life without absolute monarch, feudalism, or religious and racial discrimination. Some American founding fathers, such as Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, were inspired by William Penn's experiment. Those four patterns set up by early colonial leaders were filled with meanings for the future development of the United States. By the early 1760s, the 13 colonies in North America had developed a similar American pattern in politics, economy, and cultural life, and enjoying the same frontier environment. The English people and the Europeans had become Americans, and they were ready to separate themselves from the old world. The American Revolution officially proclaimed the birth of a new nation of Americans.